What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys had a great week out there. That's right, it's Saturday when we're doing our FAANG stock recap show. Had to push it back one day due to family reasons, but we'll be back at our regularly scheduled time next week on Friday. Every Friday, we are joined here by all of you when we recap all the FAANG stocks plus Microsoft and Tesla. We go over all the news that has happened during the week. And then we jump over to the stock chart and take a look at what's been going on with these companies. Now, I threw a little feeler out on my channel and I said, hey, what if we add like Bitcoin and stuff like this? And the general consensus is I will add another video. So if you like this style video where we talk about recap what happens during the week, all the news, some chart stuff in kind of a 20-30 minute format, well, I'm going to have another show starting next week. I'm going to probably post it on Saturdays where we recap more broader news in the stock market, maybe talk a little bit about Bitcoin, little macro news, maybe oil, maybe gold, silver, those types of things as well will encompass more stuff other than the FAANG stock. But if you enjoy just the FAANG stocks, well, it's not going to go anywhere. And guess what? We're going to kick things off like we always do with Facebook. Start of the week at about $287, slid down about 2.4%, end of the week at $283. But spoiler alert, when we get over the stock chart, boy, this one made a monster move. We'll talk about what that means here in a minute. Now, Google, Facebook, Twitter, they were all back, and Congress seems like they could just, maybe buy a house in the Washington, D.C. area for the next 4 years because they are going to be getting called in a lot. Now, what was interesting, I don't think a lot came from these news conferences. It's more for kind of a dog and pony type show. But Zuckerberg said he is arguing for tweaks to Section 230, which I think gives broadly a little bit of immunity to the social network sites on what is published on the platforms. And Zuckerberg is actually supporting tweaks to Section 230, whereas Google kind of argues against that. Here's what I think just broadly. First of all, we'll probably see some legislation, some wrist slapping and things like that. But whenever you get more regulation, supposedly make it harder for Google, Facebook, that type of thing. What it ultimately does is that actually makes it harder for competitors to come along and compete against Facebook and Google. So I think Facebook and Google are actually seeing this is their opportunity to solidify, not that they don't have a dominant market position already, but any type of regulation tends to solidify their market dominance even more. We actually saw it during the financial crisis back in 07, 08. They laid a bunch of bank regulations on board, and guess what happened? It eliminated tons and tons of small banks. Guess what? You drive around your town, you don't see a lot of small banks anymore, okay? Yeah, there's some credit unions and things like that, but it's the Bank of America's, Wells Fargo's. Those are the only institutions that were allowed to survive, primarily because of regulation. And I think Facebook, Google, and Twitter and the likes probably going to be a similar story. Now, Facebook confirms it's working on an Instagram version for children under 13. This is, you're walking on a tightrope with this type of thing. You got privacy, you got kids under 13, you got parents, you got all this stuff, but Facebook's willing to walk that tightrope, and we'll see where it goes with that. Now, Apple started the week at $121, and guess what? End of the week basically at $121. It says on my chart here up about 1% during the week. Apple is going to launch a rugged watch for athletes and hikers. So it's basically taking the Apple Watch. Now they have that lower cost Apple Watch SE. They have like the Nike branded watch. I think this is actually a smart move for Apple because a watch is a really like personalized kind of thing. And if you can make one for different niches like this one, it just seems like they're going to make it more rugged. They're going to put like a piece of rubber on it and maybe do some other things. Maybe change the advertising thing. I think a lot of this has to do with marketing. Okay. It's an Apple Watch with a piece of rubber on it, but if you market it different, and maybe you can get some more of these people that convert. It looks like Casio and some other brands have kind of a stronghold in this market. Apple's going to start coming for it. I think it's a good idea. I think Apple could do more segmenting of the Apple Watch, whether it's probably not tangible to their like bottom line in the short run, but you get more people in the ecosystem buying the phone, buying the computers, buying the tablets, things like that. Obviously good for Apple. Apple awarded a LiDAR patent for likely an Apple car. So here's the deal. So Apple is obviously, as you know, is working on this electric car. At least that's the rumors. My guess is they're waiting for a lot of their patents to really line up before they really really make some big time announcements. That's typically what Apple does, whether it's a computer or a chip or a phone or whatever it might be. They want to get all their ducks in a row on the patent side before they really start making these big announcements, because they want to lock it up. So LiDAR is kind of a sensor thing that's required in self-driving, and so we'll see how that materializes for Apple. Moving on to Amazon, start of the week at 3,090, slid down just about 0.75%, end of the week at about $3,052. Stimulus checks, spoiler alert, not breaking news here, stimulus checks flow right into online buying. So if you're one of the millions of Americans that got stimulus checks a week ago, or maybe you're still waiting on them, a lot of people are obviously spending them on e-commerce sites, and obviously Amazon is a big beneficiary of that. I am a seller on Amazon, and I can tell you just anecdotally, the minute those checks started hitting people's bank accounts, my sales went up. I mean, stuff was just selling, not as good as last year. Okay, last March and April was absolutely unbelievable. It's like bigger than Christmas, like probably twice as big as Christmas for me personally. But whenever you get those stimulus checks out there, you do see it. If you were an online seller, you actually do see the impact of that. Amazon launches on-site vaccination for frontline warehouse workers. We've obviously got the union vote that's heading on its way with Amazon. Amazon's trying to argue that they already offer kind of a progressive workplace where they pay more than minimum wage in most cases. They're doing vaccinations. They're trying to take care of their employees. This is just another more of a sign, I guess, that they're doing it. But it also is a sign that eventually these vaccinations, it's going to be maybe not like this, but almost like buying a bottle of water. Okay, you might be able to go to Costco and get one. You might be able to go to, obviously you're going to be able to go to the CVS and Rite Aids and things like that and get a vaccination, let alone your doctor or some, dedicated site. Amazon, this was interesting. So I got an email about this asking if I wanted to apply for this, since I'm an Amazon seller. Amazon gets thousands of official NFL products after its streaming deal. This is really interesting. So we talked about this last week. So Amazon negotiated to get exclusive streaming rights to the Thursday game. They already had rights to that game, but I think it was aired on NFL Network or maybe CBS or a combination of both. But now only Amazon Prime will show that Thursday game. So you need either your Amazon Prime account or borrow a friend's to watch that Thursday night game. But Amazon really, I think they use that to get access to these NFL products, because me as a seller, I actually sell like sports memorabilia, things like that, and I can't sell my NFL products on Amazon. I mean, there's a few exceptions to that, but broadly, you can't sell anything NFL product related on Amazon, let alone Nike and things from a major brand. But with the deal, it looked like I was going to be able to apply for that and sell some products onto Amazon. And so it's going to open it up. Not only Amazon is kind of a first-party seller, but third-party sellers like myself could potentially start selling NFL products. So that's obviously the NFL game on Thursday. Amazon's going to be able to monetize that by selling Prime subscriptions. But it looks like they're also going to monetize that by having a closer relationship to the NFL and allowing people to sell on their products, which is probably even higher margin business for Amazon. Thought that was interesting. Now, moving on to Netflix, started the week at 518, ended the week down slightly to 508. Netflix dipped 3.8% as people are starting to not worry, but really digest this whole streaming thing. We've got Disney Plus, there's CBS, there's Peacock. I mean, there's tons of competition out there, and it's competition for your eyeballs. I don't necessarily think it's competition for people's wallet, because the price of Netflix and a Peacock and a Disney Plus is not nearly as much as like a DirecTV or a Dish Network or a traditional cable subscription. So I don't think we're necessarily competing for people's wallets yet, but for your eyeball, there's only a certain amount of time in your day when you can watch these things. Now, Netflix co-founder kind of tipped its hat to impressive Disney Plus growth. He said it was, quote, extremely impressive. So 14 million subscribers. It took Netflix 10 years to get their first 14 million subscribers. It took Disney in 2 months to add 14 million subscribers. To me, it just shows you the power of the content library that Disney already has, and they have lots of segments. Obviously, adults are fans of Disney, but adults with children, obviously big fans as well. Now, moving on to Google. Start of the week at 2020. End of the week, basically flat. When we get over the stock chart with Google, I think there will be no surprise if you've been following these videos what it's been doing. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Now, Box, ticker symbol Box. I actually think I did a video on this, and I said, look, I think the best opportunity for owning a Dropbox or a stock like that is they would get bought out. And it looks like an activist investor, Starboard Value, is pressuring Box to potentially sell their company, and buyers might include Salesforce.com, IBM, Citrix, and Google. Now, I think the tough thing with Google, the position that they're in with a regulatory sense, is it's going to be tough to buy these things that really tie into their business and give them more leverage. I think, although Google's in the online advertising space, I think it's going to be tough for them to make acquisitions where maybe like an IBM or maybe Salesforce deal with work is getting scrutinized quite a bit. I think it's going to be tough for big tech to really consolidate. So we'll see if deals like this end up going forward. Now, next up is Microsoft. Start of the week at $232. End of the week, actually had a strong week, up 2.6%. Now we're sitting at about $236 per share. Now, the big news out of Microsoft is they're reportedly in exclusive talks to acquire a Discord, which is here somewhat popular here on YouTube. I'm subscriber of some channels that have either membership Discords or just ones that you can go and kind of discuss things. It's kind of like a discussion board, maybe a more modern, forum or discussion board that were more popular maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago when the internet was just kind of getting going. It looks like they're planning about a $10 billion price tag on this one. And when we've analyzed Microsoft on our individual videos where we talk exclusively about Microsoft every 3 months with their quarterly earnings, we've talked about how they have just a massive cash pile, and they tried to make a big move for TikTok that didn't necessarily work out. Doesn't look like it's going to work out, but we assumed that they were going to do something with that cash. Okay, they were either going to they're already doing a buyback. They already have a dividend. I didn't see them elevating that even more. I saw them maybe making acquisitions, which is exciting. We'll see if Microsoft's able to pull this through. In terms of regulatory, Microsoft does have a big presence in gaming, and from the discussion that I saw, I don't know a ton about Discord, but I saw that while the discussion on there is broad, there is a significant amount of discussion on it when it comes to gaming, which would definitely tie in nicely to some of Microsoft's business. And finally, moving on to Tesla. Start of the week, 690, rough week, actually down about 5% on this one. You might already saw this, but Elon Musk says you can now buy a Tesla with Bitcoin. I don't know if this is Tesla's major problem, because I know a couple Tesla owners, and one thing that they had trouble with, okay, if you have outright cash to buy a Tesla, whether it's a Model 3, Model S, or whatever it is, then obviously, if you have outright cash, it's not hard to buy anything, whether it's a house or stocks or a car, but financing a Tesla was a little bit more challenging than like when I went and bought my car, from a traditional auto, store or whatever, or automaker. So I don't know if this is a major problem. I don't think this is going to really drive a lot of sales, but it just shows you that Tesla is, kind of all in on this Bitcoin thing. We see Bitcoin here trading about $54,000 per Bitcoin. I wish I had a few of them lined up. Maybe I would buy a Tesla if I did. Volkswagen revs up its electric vehicle race against Tesla. So Volkswagen announced that they made its first, of course, we've been hearing this for a decade. Okay, Ford is ramping up their, and GM and all these companies are supposedly, they're going to challenge Tesla. And then, a couple years go by and not a whole lot's happened. But this is tangible because they said they made their first deliveries of their new ID4 electric model to customers in Germany, and they're expected to deliver about 150,000 of these things worldwide this year. So 150,000 cars, not anything to sneeze at there. Now, Tesla plans to deliver 15 electric trucks to Pepsico. So Pepsico actually ordered 15 trucks, and it looks like they're going to get 15 of them this year, and they're going to be driving around here in California. So I'll tell you, if I see any of these on the road, I don't necessarily think this is like Tesla's next massive opportunity. I think Tesla's next massive opportunity is a sub like probably $27,000 car, $25,000 car, one that they can make a relatively good margins on, but they can sell just tons and tons and tons of them. That's their next big market. Okay. They already have the $100,000 car. They've got another Roadster coming out. They've got, the truck coming out. I think that could be a big market for them. But I think this is just a piece of the puzzle for them. So if they can get this electric truck thing going, we could see some positive momentum in Tesla heading forward, especially from a fundamental perspective. The charts probably say a different thing. Now, moving on to speaking of the charts, let's move on to them. We've got Facebook here. This thing did a monster move. We talked about how it bottomed out here a couple weeks ago or a week or so ago at around 254. This thing rallied all the way up to almost basically all-time highs, okay? It basically intraday, I think all-time high on this one is about 304. We got to about 300. Sellers stepped in, and they stepped in hard. This one traded all the way down to 278. We got a bounce here. I put in this is actually a new trend line right here, area of support. It was actually, resistance here. It was resistance all along here. It was a little bit of support here, a little bit of support here. So right at 278, in my opinion, buyers have stepped in here with Facebook. This thing, again, has bounced up into this 280 range. Here's what I'm seeing on this one. Okay, we have basically made what I think is looking something like this, basically an uptrend here, where we came up and we bounced down here, and now we're bouncing back up. So here's the possibilities heading into next week, and we're probably looking at more like a 2 to 3 week window here. All these companies report earnings over the next, I think it's 3 weeks away, 4 weeks away. So we're not super close. I wouldn't necessarily expect like big moves one way or another, but I could see this one continuing to trend up because you've made a low here. You've made a much, much higher low here. Very bullish sign would be if we could push back up into this 300. If we push back up and over 300, it could be that we're pulling forward a lot of the gains that you could see in an earnings report. So I'd be careful to monitor that one, but this one is setting up very nicely. Everybody's talking about, oh, the market's crashing, it's over, everything's done. This chart is not saying that. This chart is saying that this stock just made a much higher low, and if it can push forward. Now, if it breaks this low and we close down here below 278, if next week Facebook closes below 278, well, it might have been just a fake out, and it'll still be a higher low, but in the shorter term, it will have broken it. So we'll kind of just keep an eye on that one. Now, moving on to Apple, doing something a little bit different, not as steep of a move, and that actually might be a good thing. So again, we saw Apple a couple weeks ago bottomed out at this, we'll call that 115. This is kind of what I'm seeing, is that we made a low here, and then we bottomed out here at 120. I mean, we basically stuck at 120 for a good week and a half here with Apple. It really hasn't done a whole lot. It's peaked up to 127, but it's really hugged this 120, 121. It's consolidating sideways. Buyers are kind of stepping in here. Sellers have somewhat dried up. It's gonna move one way or another. And if you look at Facebook, if you look at Google, if you look at some of these other stocks, they have broken to the upside. So wouldn't surprise me if Apple does that. If it doesn't, we do have some targets down here in the 100, 109, 108. That would be attractive in my opinion. Even back down here at 115, in my opinion, would be attractive. I would anticipate this one to make a move at some point, but it wouldn't surprise me if we just consolidate sideways, continuing to do that with Apple. Now, moving on to Amazon. Almost exact story is what we just talked about. We bottomed out here just under 2,900 per share, but we made a higher low, okay? We made a low here at 20, we'll call that 2,900. We came up here, made a low at 3,000. Now we're sitting at about 30.50 on this one. Now, what we saw here is this green line is our 50-day moving average. It has proven to be resistance on the way up. And so you're kind of in a tight range here with Amazon, but this one's channeling upwards, okay? We're kind of making one of these kind of things right here with Amazon where we're just kind of channeling up. That's not unhealthy. Now, I know a lot of people, they're sitting there looking at GameStop, they're looking at Bitcoin, they're looking at these stocks that are making monster moves. That is not necessarily, I would not be interested in any of these stocks for a monster move. I'm interested in getting in these for the long term and monitoring them for the long term because they are cornerstones of the economy and the stock market and can be cornerstones of your portfolio. I think this is kind of what we've got until further noticed. As long as we don't break the bottom end of this channel Here we are with Amazon, and I would say Apple's probably in that same group. Now, moving on to Netflix, this one not looking as great because, as you can see here, we made a higher low here, okay? So we made a low here, and then we made another low that just is a little bit higher right here, okay? So Netflix I'm monitoring, okay? Because they're in the business of streaming, I don't necessarily, their lever that they were going to be able to pull, okay, whether they had competition or not, the lever that they were going to pull here, at least in North America, was raising prices, okay? But if you have a lot of competition from Disney or CBS or Peacock or whatever streaming platform it is, well, it's going to be tough for them to raise price. So how are they going to differentiate themselves? And that's through content. But how can you compete against a Disney or even like an NBC or something like that when it comes to content? It's going to be difficult. So it's not one I'm going to necessarily run into, but there's a price for everything. We are in what I actually see here as a pretty steep downward. We're more in kind of like this, downward channel with Netflix. And until we break out above that, I would expect that to kind of be in place. Netflix is one I'm monitoring. I think this could set up for trade opportunities, especially if you pull back down here into the 470 range with this one. That's only about $30 from where it is on the stock chart right now. So we'll keep an eye on Netflix. Moving on to Google. Same old story here. Boy, it's been the same story with this one since, the beginning of February. So like over a month and a half here. This thing is just channeled between 216. I mean, I could just like replay the same thing that we say every week with Google. From 213 up to 2120 or so. This thing's just been going sideways, and it's really a buy. It's a buyer stepping in here at 2012, 2020, and they sell when it gets up here to 2120. So it's like in a $100 range. How you want to play this, I'll let you decide. Quite frankly, I don't know when it's going to break out from this. Tell you what, if it breaks down below this, yeah, you got some opportunities down here. You got this big gap. I would expect that to fill. You got opportunities down here at 1920, about $100 less than where we're at. If it breaks above 2120, look, the sky's the limit. This thing could go 22, 23, 24, depending on the earnings. I think it's going to depend a lot on earnings. So Google's got earnings coming up here in a few weeks, and so we'll monitor that. Maybe that'll be the catalyst to kind of break us out of that range that we're in. Microsoft, not too unsimilar to Google, okay? We've been kind of channeling up here, but this is what I'm seeing with Microsoft is we made this low down here at 224, and I just pulled that trend line. That's not what I wanted to do. We made this low at around 224. I'll come in here. This is not going to be exact, but we've kind of making this upward trend line, and we're kind of pulling like an Amazon here. I think we're kind of channeling here, and we've got one of these going on. That's not the best, illustration of that, but I think you got to get the story here. As long as Microsoft can kind of stay in this channel and just churn higher, I would anticipate sellers to step in at this 245 range. You also have, again, that $10 billion acquisition, depending on how that goes. I mean, if it goes from 10 billion to 15 billion, that might be negative for some, some shareholders might see that as a negative, that they had to pay 50% more. But if it's around that $10 billion mark and they can really explain to investors how they're going to tie this in, maybe with like an Xbox or some of their streaming stuff, well, it could be bullish for, Microsoft investors. We'll see how it goes. This one, to me, again, I would anticipate sellers to step in here at 245. You get any opportunity on this one coming back into the 220s, 230, even 230. My opinion, if you want to buy Microsoft, could be a spot where you could potentially buy it. Now, finally, moving on to a Tesla. This one's making like a weirder formation. Some could call this like a pennant. I don't know. I don't know enough about technical analysis. I just know in the very, very, very short term, this one is like trending down. I mean, my chart's doing all kinds of weird things, but this one is like kind of channeling down. We've got this channel downwards here, but we've got this 50-day moving average coming up here. This is this like North Carolina blue line here, and this is sitting at 511 right now, which is $110 away from where the stock is right now. But as if this stock keeps going down, this line will keep going up. Eventually, it would turn negative, but it's positive right now. I would actually anticipate. I don't want to say I would anticipate this, but if Tesla is to pull back to this blue line, wherever it is, okay, a week from now, it might be up to 540, it might be 520, wherever it is. Well, I would expect actually this to be a level of support, and it wouldn't surprise me if Tesla actually tests this mark. Whether or not it does, I don't know. We are in just kind of a sideways consolidating, basically from the 700 down to about 600. From 6 to 700, this thing is in a sideways consolidation. A pullback into 540 could be a buying opportunity. Any lower than that, I think anywhere around this 50-day moving average, lower than that, which is I'm kind of open for it, but I don't think I'm necessarily going to get it. Anywhere in that 400, 420, 440 range would obviously be a significant buying opportunity. But this one's still, we did make a higher low, okay? So we had a low here, and then we made a higher low here, okay? So we're basically, depending on how you look at this, we're basically doing this, okay? And if Tesla can bounce here and then retest 700, 720, it could be back off to the races. Again, we've got earnings approaching for all these companies. So Tesla is going to be 428. So not too long. We got about a month still to go. So, it'll be interesting to see what these stocks do. Microsoft's also on 428. Google's 427. Netflix is conveniently on 420. Amazon's on 429. So is Apple, 429, and Facebook will report with Microsoft and Tesla on 428. So we'll see what happens. But if you enjoyed this video, again, starting next week, it's likely going to be a Saturday show where we talk about I'm going to save all the top news stories for the week. So if you don't follow the stock market like major closely, it'll be a good show where we kind of recap what happened last week. But also what I want to do is give you insight in the earnings that happen next week, the following week, that is, and then also maybe some key dates, maybe some Fed news, maybe some macro events, maybe some, some unemployment numbers, whatever it might be that might come out that just give you a little feeling about what's going to happen next week, and maybe some trade opportunities, things like that. Just a broader show where we get to talk about even more stuff that I really like to follow. I love Bitcoin, I love oil, love gold and silver, like macro news, things like that. It'll be an exciting show. I'm not exactly sure what we'll call it, but take a look at that. That'll start next week. Thanks for tuning in this week on our FAANG Stock Recap Show. Consider hitting that like button and that subscribe button. If you haven't already, leave me a comment down below. Love hearing from all of you. Good luck with all your investments.